Hello, welcome to the Talking Michigan Transportation Podcast. I'm Jeff Cranston. This week, a panel convened in Lansing to talk about what else but a road funding deal. What to do, what can be done, how did we get here, why are Michigan's roads and bridges facing yet another cliff, meaning without significant investment, the deterioration is going to be really bad. Some very scary data was shared on that front and what the pavement projections look like without more investment. So I spoke with John Peracchio, who helped organize this panel and moderated the discussion. He was an original member and co-chair of the Council on Future Mobility. And then when that was reconstituted as the Office of Future Mobility and Electrification, he became an advisor to that group. He has a long history with things related to mobility and transportation and had a lot of interesting things to say, asked a lot of good questions of the panel, which included some very thoughtful people from various disciplines. So I hope you enjoy what John had to say to recap that panel and what his takeaway was. So John Peracchio, as I mentioned before, has been a regular guest on the podcast. I first got to know John when he was a co-chair of the Council on Future Mobility in the previous administration. He stayed on as an advisor, helped stand up what was the reconstituted Office of Future Mobility and Electrification. I always enjoyed talking to him. Today, like I said in the introduction, I really want to talk to him about a panel that he helped moderate, helped organize and moderate of people from different points of view, different backgrounds about the road funding crisis. And it really is a crisis in Michigan. It has been for a long time. It seems kind of odd to keep calling something a crisis when it's been around for decades, but that's really an accurate term. So John, thank you as always for taking time to do this and being generous enough to share your views.
Happy to do so. I think it was a very engaging discussion we had with there were probably a half a dozen legislators and some staff folks this morning, and I think it was, as I say, a good discussion. I'm not sure we actually moved the needle in terms of getting folks to really focus on, as you put it, the crisis. And by the way, the crisis transcends roads. It includes, of course, as you know, bridges. It includes local roads, and it includes public transportation. We really need to understand what kind of transit systems we would like in our state. And so it's, for me, it's an all-encompassing challenge, the funding issue for transportation.
Yeah, and before we talk more about what came out of today and your takeaways and I think both of our observations, you've always had a real passion for transit and a belief, I think, a social justice belief that everybody deserves mobility. But to talk about your background even before you were involved in the Council of Future Mobility and what informs your views and really your passion for all things mobility.
Well, I'm an auto industry person, so worked for a major tier one supplier for 10 years. And then I decided to go out on my own and start a consulting business in the intelligent transportation sector. So that was, at the time we defined it very narrowly as vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to infrastructure communication, highly automated vehicles. And when we talk about highly automated, the hope way back when was that we could provide accessible transportation to folks who were challenged with disabilities. And so the automation was to enable the disabled to get from point A to point B. And then if you extrapolate from that to providing folks with a very cost-effective way of getting out of neighborhoods that are not serviced by public transit today, that was another aspect that very much intrigued me. And at the time, we're talking about 2007 when I decided to do this. There were actually a lot of financial investors who were interested in the space, and and so I had, financial investor clients, and then I gradually morphed into having just strategic clients, and then I got more involved in different aspects of intelligent transportation systems, which include tolling, transit fare collection systems, and things like that. And so it just kind of moved. When I look back, it seems jarring that I kind of went from one thing to the other, but in fact, it was seamless to get involved in various aspects and across transportation modes.
So I will bring this back to the topic of the day, and that's the discussion about funding. But because you mentioned transportation for people with disabilities and the promise that automation promises for those, I think one thing that's often overlooked, and I've tried to emphasize it over the years, and our former director, Kirk Steidel, has, and you have too. In fact, I wrote some testimony for the former director before he went before a subcommittee in Congress. And one of the things I highlighted was the difficulty most of us face having that conversation with our parents or another elderly loved one about taking the keys away. And there's nothing that says independence more than being able to drive your own vehicle when you want, where you want. And that's one of the things that I think automated, if we ever get to truly autonomous vehicles, promises. But there's also a funding component there, I think, in that you could maximize capacity by doing that, right? And you might not need as much or need to build more, which obviously would save money on infrastructure in the long term.
Well, there's so many opportunities to scale various transportation modes and then avoid, bluntly, congestion, because you've got more folks sharing rides and using a public transit system. And oh, by the way, we a lot of us are very interested in combating climate change and reducing emissions associated with transportation. I'll tell you, I can lower our carbon footprint a lot faster by simply getting folks on an internal combustion engine bus versus individuals driving their own ICE vehicles, right? And so to the extent that we can invest in public transportation, we actually can help the environment. We can provide reliable personal transportation to folks who otherwise wouldn't have it, and at a very efficient price.
So we didn't talk about this much today, but where do you think we are in terms of moving toward more automated features and eventually, autonomous vehicles? Is the pace slowed? Are we still getting there? Are various components of the industry still moving in that direction?
Clearly they are, and the technology is evolving very, very quickly. I'm always cautious, however, at predicting precisely when we will get to, what are called the SAE higher levels of automation, especially when you're talking about levels 4 and 5. Level three, I think, where the driver has to be available if the vehicle says, "Hey, we need your help." I have to wear my lawyer hat and say that's not a good place to be, given our current tort system. But that technology is out there. It's being deployed in other parts of the world. And we'll have to see how that works. But right now, when I see on YouTube Waymos and other so-called fully autonomous vehicles running into telephone poles and running red lights, I think we need to maybe take a little longer to deploy those at scale.
Yeah, so let's bring it back to today's discussion. What's your overall takeaway? Were you pleased? In the panel, I should mention it was a very thoughtful group. You had, a media person who's been covering this for a long time. You had somebody representing the contracting industry, the road builders who do the work, who's also been at this for a long time, talking about this probably as long as I have. You had somebody representing clean fuels and what the potential is for alternative vehicles and how that factors in to funding, certainly. And then you also had somebody from the Reason Foundation to talk about vehicle miles traveled or road user charges, which is, I think, becoming more of the common term. It's also called mileage-based user fees. I think one thing that might help us get in that direction is to just agree on a term. But it was a very, very good panel, very thoughtful discussion. But I want to know what you came away with.
So, first of all, thanks to you and to the administration for helping to identify and recruit the panelists. I couldn't agree with you more. We had a really good set of inputs, both from a data perspective and from a sort of a individual understanding of what the problems are and what the potential solutions are. So from that perspective, I was extremely pleased. I think the Q&A, though, was more compelling for me and maybe not quite as positive. I detected from legislators frustration, and the negativity is not about their particular positions on some of these issues that we discussed. Rather, it's the frustration that they know there's a problem, and it's very difficult politically to get to a reasoned policy option to solve that problem. And maybe I'm a little jaded because I've not been around state government as long as you, but I have since I was kind of thinking about this morning since 2017, when Governor Snyder appointed me to co-chair the former Council on Future Mobility. It is a difficult thing to work through for two houses of the legislature and an administration that's on its last legs in terms of timing.
Yeah, that's a definitely part of the discussion is term limits and the need to re-educate people. We got a little bit of a reprieve with the legislation that altered the term limits law, but we still have those challenges trying to start from scratch with a new batch every couple of years. One thing I was hoping would resonate, and I don't think it did, so much of the discussion is about how we can save money. How do we not spend this money instead of flipping that around and viewing it as an investment? And the economic development imperative of that, we touched on that some, but I just don't think it breaks through enough. I've told you the story about a longtime person here in Grand Rapids, Birgit Close, who used to be the president of the Right Place Economic Development Group, similar to Ann Arbor Spark or Southwest Michigan First, or countless such groups around the state. And she told me a horror story once about a potential business person flew into town just a couple miles from the airport, said, man, if this is what Michigan's roads look like, no thanks. And, went back to the airport and left. I don't know how to make that break through to people, the policymakers that are making these decisions, that this is not just money you're throwing at something. This is an investment. This is not just jobs for building the roads. It's jobs that are supported by building roads.
So I completely agree with you. I was disheartened by the, talk about, taking money from waste in state government and applying it to the roads without naming who is actually articulating that. I mean, to me, that's just like shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic. Okay, we have to reroute around the iceberg. We can't just be fussing with what's on deck when we see this big iceberg headed our way. And to your point about economic development, if you will recall, when Amazon was evaluating southeastern Michigan for HQ2, right, at the top of the list of things that they came back with in terms of explaining why they chose not to locate in our neighborhood was the lack of a reliable, integrated public transportation system in southeastern Michigan. So it's a great example of, the roads need to be, we need to invest in the roads. We need to invest in our bridges. We need to invest in public transportation in order to attract and retain both businesses, economic activity, and people. The talent is just as important as the businesses that we attract to the state of Michigan. And it's a sad fact that many folks who go to our fine, and we've talked about this, go to our fine we're blessed in Michigan with some of the best institutions of higher learning in the world. Okay. And every single year when folks graduate from these places, they leave the state of Michigan to go someplace else.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And I think that it isn't just the person that's thinking of relocating a business. It is that talent that says, look, I could get a good job and buy a really cool condo in Corktown, but I have to drive on roads that look like Beirut. And how much fun is that? And
or what if you just don't even want to drive?
Well,
so
right.
A lot of young people today, especially the cohort that's graduating from an undergraduate program and even graduate programs, they want to live in a world where they don't have to drive. Now, I'm from Detroit. I was born in Detroit. I want everybody to have a car. I think that's just wonderful. The problem is both new and used vehicles right now at the price points that are out there on average. They're beyond even, people 2, 3, 4 times above the federal poverty level. All right. When you're looking at that equation, you have to provide an alternative for folks to get from point A to point B, or they're going to go live someplace else.
Yeah, no, I think we focus a lot, rightly, and as we should, on housing and the cost of housing. But you make a really good point that that student graduates and maybe drives the late model car that their parents handed off to them at some point. But are they going to have a job that allows them to buy a new car when they need to, or even a decent used car? I think you make a really good point. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
Know before you go. Head on over to MyDrive to check out the latest on road construction and possible delays along your route. For a detailed map, head over to michigan.gov/drive.
Talk a little bit about what these pavement numbers mean. You kind of became familiar with it as you looked into it, and you set it up in your intro very well. And I always submit that we need to do more to help people understand what it means to have good pavement or poor pavement or fair pavement, because unless you can show them a visual, or better yet, put them in a simulation theater where maybe your seats shake, based on, say, you're driving down this kind of road. I was talking with Tim Lemon, our pavement specialist, on the way back from the panel this morning about how I wonder if we should come up with a cup of coffee measure. At what level pavement can you drive and not spill your coffee, basically? And poor means you're going to spill your coffee. And I think probably what resonated most, it popped out at you, was that by 2030 we could be at 50%. Is that your memory?
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. But I mean, for the killer were these two data points, which is, okay, if you want to settle for just 10% poor pavement, you're looking at $25 billion over the next 10 years. So that's $2.5 billion per year. And so that's good. We're going to tolerate spilled coffee. And somebody made the point about vehicle repair costs going through the roof because of our poor pavement. So for 10% poor, you're talking about a $25 billion bill over 10 years. But let's say we don't care that much, and coffee's cheap, and we like to encourage our repair shops. So we'll settle for 30% poor. That's still talking about $13 billion or $1.3 billion per year that we don't have right now. Okay. And that would result in the state maintained routes having the worst pavement condition in the last 30 years. Now, you just, sort of think about that for just a nanosecond, and you go, wait a minute, what kind of a transportation world do we want to live in Michigan?
So one thing that Chad Livengood, who was our media person on the panel, he's written extensively about, and you asked him about this, and I wonder, this is probably something that occurred to you before, but maybe this put a finer point on it for you. When he talked about the proliferation of developments in townships and exurban, suburban areas around the state that don't come with any plan for operations or maintenance for the roadways. We just take it for granted, right? I'm going to buy this house out here. Of course, I'm going to have roads that service it. And I equated it to you in a conversation to any given county building a new jail facility and raising the money appropriately enough to build it but then not thinking about how they're going to maintain it and operate it in the future. And, did you feel like you learned anything from that part of Chad's dissertation, I guess we'll call it?
Yeah, so as an old real estate lawyer, I am familiar with the routine, right? So the developers develop, let's say, a subdivision, they create roads, and then they publicly dedicate them. Okay. And everybody thinks about that. Well, isn't that nice that the developer is just basically dedicating these roads to the public? But what brought it, sort of in glaring focus were Chad's comments, because, okay, now who takes care of that after this wonderful dedication to the public realm? And there's no plan. And that part I hadn't really thought of in a long, long time, if I ever thought about it. I mean, I knew the theory of dedicating public roads, but then, like, who's going to take care of it? Oh yeah, we forgot about that. And then the other thing that leapt out at me from Chad's remarks was the crazy quote jurisdictional situation in terms of, the state trunk line roads, counties have some responsibilities, townships and cities, and it's all a crazy quilt of jurisdictions overlapping. And a lot of times people are just blaming somebody else in various levels of government for not fixing something or not figuring out, what, we're going to need to do a millage on this if we really want our roads fixed. And that's the part that is very difficult to explain to people. And that came out of some of the comments from the legislators, which I think they're valid comments. I mean, I think they try to explain stuff to their constituents, and it can be very frustrating.
Well, it's very complex. I mean, most people don't know that we have more than 600 road agencies in the state. Is that necessary when we talk about, economies of scale and whether we could do things differently? Okay, some states have a broader jurisdiction, and it's really not about anybody seizing power. It's just about getting more bang for your buck.
Well, and without taking a left turn here, look at how transit is organized in southeastern Michigan. Does that make any sense? Okay, you've got
same thing. Yeah.
Right. All right. And you've got Detroit DOT having its system. You have SMART having its system. The systems do not connect precisely. And then you have an RTA, which is basically a funding and planning activity. It's not really an operating agency.
Yeah, it took a lot to just get establishing an RTA over the finish line, and then coming up with a sustainable funding model. It still hasn't happened.
Still hasn't happened, right?
I think that was 2012. So 13 years. We've got some time. Talk a little bit about what Baruch Feigenbaum of the Reason Foundation spoke about, because that's really in your wheelhouse. I know you're very interested with your background in tolling and user fees. What was your takeaway from his input?
Well, bluntly, he provided the answers to the exam, if you want to use them, which is to charge folks based on how many miles they traveled. It's called a user fee. And there are lots of kinds of technologies that can be used to do that. Somebody raised the concern about privacy. It always comes up when you're talking about, tracking folks in order to make a mileage-based user fee system work. And I answered that one with my standard question in reply, which is, do you have a smart device on you? Is it on? And everybody always says, oh, yes, it is. And then I say, they know where you are. Get over yourself. And so, I mean, I'm just not very patient with the privacy argument. That said, it can't be dismissed out of hand. You have to educate folks on why you're doing something. What happens to the data? You can dump the data if you have a system that works. And then you focus on customer care, making sure that people who have their accounts to pay for the mileage-based fees are taken care of. That when there's a problem with an invoice or a problem with a payment, there's a system in place to handle those things. And all of that needs to be a part of an education program to let folks know how this could work.
Yeah, I think well put. What else? Anything else that you want to add that you came away with that maybe you didn't know, or that maybe reinforced something important about this discussion?
Well, there were no surprises for me, although I didn't understand the history of the dysfunction that both Chad and Director Weifrick, who made a great point. This is not this crisis, and you talked about it earlier. This crisis didn't just creep up on us. It's been around for decades, right? And there's this horror's tale that Chad related to us about how someone tried this, it didn't work. Somebody tried something else, and that didn't work. That for me was instructive, because it means it's a big challenge, and so we have to have the best people we can find to work on it and solve the problem. And it's got to be a group effort, because the group broke it in the first place.
Yeah, Lance Bino-Nemi of the Michigan Infrastructure and Transportation Association, the industry representative on the panel, said later, after Chad recounted the 2014 lame duck period, when there was almost a true sustainable solution that would have really taken care of things for a long time, and it didn't get done, and they decided to go to the ballot. And I think it gave me PTSD too to remember that and how badly that failed, because it would have solved a lot of problems. I mean, no less than Rob Fowler of the Small Business Association of Michigan, not by any means a liberal organization, called that proposal elegant because of all the things that it would have solved and all the things within it. But it was very easy to break apart and to throw darts at for opponents, because it was so complicated. And as you know, if somebody doesn't understand a ballot issue, they're going to vote no.
Absolutely. And that's actually the beauty of road usage charging, because it doesn't matter what kind of powertrain you have in your vehicle. It doesn't matter, where you go. The system will work very simply on a per mile basis. And if you drive to that awful place, Ohio, we won't charge you for that, because we know you're not on a Michigan road. All right. Mm-hmm. So the simplicity of road usage charging, and what Baruch Feigenbaum outlined, is that it's very fair. And it does, and I talked about this a little bit, it does offer policy options if you want. If you want to calibrate the user fee based on income levels so that richer people pay more, you can do that. If you want to have different rates for different roads, that maybe some roads are more expensive to maintain, you can do that as well. So there are policy options that really no other system offers. And what's happening today with the gas and the sales tax is it's very obfuscating in terms of where the funding is coming from, and not necessarily clear where the funding is going.
So I've had this conversation with reporters over the years, and I remember one talking about comparing us to Ohio. And I said, well, for one thing, they have a higher gas tax, and just when Michigan raised theirs, then Ohio raised theirs even higher. And they spend $1 billion more than Michigan does. And that makes a difference. And $350 million is what they take in on the turnpike alone. And this reporter said to me, well, that's just one road. And I'm like, well, that's $350 million that you can spend elsewhere, that you don't have to spend on that one road, which is, 2 signed interstates at some points. It's that busy of a route. So we'll keep talking about this, obviously, but I wanted to have you on because I thought it was a thoughtful panel. It was a good idea to do it. The timing was good, coming the day after a rally of all kinds of labor folks and industry types that descended on the Capitol like hordes, estimates of 4,000 to 5,000 people. And hopefully this will all lead to more discussion and maybe some significant solutions. We'll see.
Agreed. Thank you for having me, Jeff.
I'd like to thank you once more for tuning in to Talking Michigan Transportation. You can find show notes and more on Apple Podcasts or Buzzsprout. I also want to acknowledge the talented people who help make this a reality each week, starting with Randy Debler, who skillfully edits the audio, Jesse Ball, who proofs the content, Courtney Bates, who posts the podcast to various platforms, and Jackie Salinas, who transcribes the audio to make it accessible to all.